It would only take him 43 minutes, just 43 minutes, to completely dismantle 7 years of a meticulously crafted public image. 43 minutes to expose how the bartender-turned-congresswoman, who often spoke about working families, had actually squeezed thousands of dollars from working people. The same person who called for climate sacrifice while personally blowing $30,000 on Uber rides. Someone who fabricated trauma she never experienced, then fundraised millions of dollars based on that lie. So she arrived at the Senate hearing, fully prepared for a confrontation. Little did she know, she had just walked into her own political execution. The quiet country lawyer from Louisiana never once raised his voice. He didn't need to, not even a little. He simply asked questions. Just simple, straightforward questions. Questions that any everyday working person would naturally ask. And when he finished, even her 14 million Instagram followers couldn't save her career. And the Senate Budget Committee hearing room itself exuded the heavy weight of institutional authority. Dark wood paneling, a raised dais for senators, and a witness table positioned beneath them, almost like an altar awaiting judgment. Cameras lined the back wall, their small red lights blinking like ominous warning beacons. Representative Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez approached the witness table with the unwavering confidence of someone who had truly mastered the art of viral moments. At just 35, she'd skyrocketed from a bartender to a congresswoman in under a decade, racking up an impressive 14 million Instagram followers along the way. She wore a perfectly tailored burgundy blazer, her makeup absolutely flawless for the cameras. Members of the squad sat conspicuously in the gallery, wearing their AOC shirts in a show of solidarity. The progressive media filled the press section, poised and ready to capture her every performance. Meanwhile, Senator John Kennedy of Louisiana sat quietly at the committee table, methodically organizing his manila folders with uncanny precision. At 73, with his white hair slightly disheveled and reading glasses perched precariously on his nose, he truly looked like someone's grandfather about to show off vacation photos. But those who really knew him recognized that familiar posture, a predator carefully arranging his tools just before the hunt. And the stated topic for the hearing seemed straightforward enough: fiscal reality and various progressive policy proposals. However, Kennedy's staff had been quietly digging for weeks behind the scenes. The manila folders before him contained irrefutable ammunition, enough to utterly end careers. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, Kennedy began, his distinct Louisiana drawl stretching syllables out like warm, pulled taffy. I truly do appreciate you joining us here today, and I know you're an incredibly busy young lady. Thank you, Senator Kennedy, AOC replied, her voice radiating a practiced media warmth. I'm always more than happy to discuss how we can collectively build a more just economy. Well, now, that truly is good to hear. Real good indeed. Kennedy adjusted his reading glasses, then slowly pulled out the very first document, her congressional financial disclosure. See, before we even begin talking about building anything, I believe we should first establish some basic baseline understanding of the numbers involved. Now, I'm a man who's 73 years old. I was already practicing law long before you were even born. I spent 17 years as Louisiana's state treasurer, managing billions of dollars, and I had to meticulously account for every single penny. He then looked up from his papers, fixing her with that mild, questioning expression he'd used to dismantle countless witnesses before. So, naturally, when I happen to see numbers that don't quite add up, I tend to notice them. And your numbers, young lady, well, they've got me feeling a bit puzzled. Kennedy then displayed her financial disclosure document prominently on the overhead screen. According to these official documents you personally filed with the House, you officially earn $174,000 per year. Now, that's a truly fine salary, putting you squarely in the top 10% of all American earners. Definitely nothing to sneeze at, wouldn't you say? He then pulled out a series of photographs. AOC getting into her Tesla, walking into her upscale DC apartment building, and attending various events dressed in designer clothes. But you, Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, drive a rather expensive $64,000 Tesla Model 3. That's roughly twice what the average American typically spends on a car. You also live in a high-end luxury apartment within the desirable Navy Yards neighborhood. The nice building even boasts an infinity pool, I'm told. And you consistently wear some mighty fine, fashionable clothes to all those fancy events. Kennedy looked at her then, his expression laced with what seemed like genuine curiosity. So, my very simple question to you is this. Exactly how do you manage to afford all of that on your congressional salary? AOC promptly delivered her practiced response about diligent budgeting and making smart financial choices. Kennedy nodded slowly, and the kind of nod you might give someone earnestly explaining that the moon is, in fact, made of cheese. Well, I'm absolutely sure you're an incredibly fiscally responsible individual. We'll definitely circle back to that later. He then calmly opened a brand new folder and carefully pulled out a photograph that had, by now, circled the entire globe. It was AOC, resplendent in her white Tax the Rich dress, at the Met Gala, surrounded by a glittering array of celebrities and billionaires. So now, I've personally never had the pleasure of attending the Met Gala, Kennedy remarked conversationally. Not invited, I suppose, he added with a chuckle, but I did take the time to look it up. A staggering $30,000 for a single ticket, he stated. That's more than half the median American household income, spent on just one party. He deliberately let that fact sink in. Now, your dress famously declared tax the rich, which is quite a bold statement to make at a party absolutely packed with billionaires. It's like wearing a Go Vegan shirt to a steakhouse, as my grandson might humorously say. A few people in the gallery couldn't help but chuckle softly. Kennedy's expression, however, remained entirely pleasant. But here's what truly interests me about this particular photograph. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez. It's not the dress, it's not the party, and it's certainly not the billionaires. He then carefully pulled out official House Ethics Committee documents. You see, you were actually investigated by the House Ethics Committee specifically for your attendance at this very event. And do you know what they discovered? Kennedy locked eyes with her, his voice gaining a sharper tone, even as he kept that familiar slow drawl. You simply didn't pay your bills to working people. The entire room fell silent. AOC's usually confident expression briefly flickered. Now, let's really dig into those unpaid bills, shall we? Kennedy then pulled out a stack of invoices, each one clearly marked with red stamps, either overdue or sent to collections. He handled them with the precision of a prosecutor presenting evidence in a murder case. The House Ethics Committee's deep dive into your Met Gala appearance was incredibly thorough, and they uncovered some truly interesting details. She was the one who did your makeup for the Met Gala, and she sent you an invoice for $344.85. This was back in September of 2021. Kennedy glanced up from the document. Ms. Davenport sent you 3 separate reminders. That's right, 3. She patiently waited for 6 long months. Eventually, she was left with absolutely no other choice. She had to send it over to a collections agency. It was marked as extremely overdue. Do you have any idea what that does to a small business owner's finances, young lady? He didn't pause to wait for an answer. It meant she couldn't even pay her own bills, all while waiting for you to pay yours. She's a single mother, raising 2 kids. Now, $344 might not feel like much to someone who attends $30,000 parties. But for her, that amount means groceries for an entire month. Kennedy gently set down that invoice, then picked up another one. And then, there's the hairstylist. The bill was for $477.73. It took you nearly a full year to finally pay. The stylist actually had to send a formal letter to your staff. Kennedy read from it, slowly and deliberately. It would truly look terrible if we were forced to file a complaint with the New York Department of Labor against Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. That's essentially a direct threat to file a labor violation against you, the very congresswoman who constantly talks about protecting workers. Yet another invoice. The next one, from Hotel Carlalelli, totaled $4,620.92. It sat unpaid for 8 months. Yes, a full 8 months. All those hotel workers, housekeepers, front desk staff, and kitchen crew, they waited for their payment while you were busy posting on Instagram about fighting for working families. So Kennedy methodically stacked the invoices, including the $990 dress rental, which was also months overdue. He quickly did the arithmetic on a small notepad, making sure his writing was large enough for all the cameras to easily capture. A grand total of $6,413 went unpaid to working people, all while you were driving around in your $64,000 car and living it up in your luxury apartment, even as you became one of the most famous members of Congress. Kennedy then slowly removed his glasses, looking at AOC with what could only be described as profound disappointment. Young lady, you constantly talk about fighting for working families. You deliver impassioned speeches about economic justice. But when those very working people, the ones who served you, who helped you look good for your big fancy party, asked you to pay them, you simply ignored them. For months on end, some even had to threaten legal action just to get what they were owed. He paused, you allowing the weighty silence to truly stretch. Now, I'm just a simple country lawyer from Louisiana. But back where I come from, we have a name for that: hypocrisy. AOC attempted to respond, mumbling about staff errors and oversight, but Kennedy was already moving right along to his next point. But the Met Gala, that's really just one example of what I'm trying to tell you. Let's take a broader look at your overall lifestyle. Kennedy then pulled out even more documents: property records, to campaign finance reports, and even photos straight from her social media. Your Tesla, for instance, costs a whopping $64,000. That's literally twice the average car price across America. How many working families in your district could possibly afford something like that? And your Navy Yards apartment? I actually took the time to look up the building. It's at least $2,000 per month minimum. It comes with an infinity pool, a gym, and even a rooftop terrace. Sounds incredibly nice, doesn't it? Meanwhile, the average rent back in your own Bronx district is $1,600, and most families there are already struggling just to pay that. He then prominently displayed several photos from her Instagram feed. Designer clothes at multiple events, blazers costing thousands, high-end accessories, all while you're out there telling working people they need to sacrifice even more. Kennedy then pulled out the details of the most recent scandal: campaign finance disclosures from just a few weeks earlier. And this information is absolutely fresh. Dated December of 2024. Your latest campaign spending reports had just been released. You reportedly used campaign donations, money directly from working people who truly believe in you, to stay at luxury hotels and dine at upscale restaurants during a trip to Puerto Rico. He read directly from the report. 5-star accommodations, premium catering services, elite venues. Kennedy paused and looked up. The National Republican Congressional Committee, they called it, and I quote, peak hypocrisy from a walking scam. But Kennedy, he still wasn't finished. And then there's the whole situation with your grandmother, your abuela. Remember back when you posted those photos of her house in Puerto Rico, showing the damaged roof and crumbling walls? You posted those, claiming Republicans simply didn't care enough about Puerto Rico. Kennedy displayed the very photos AOC herself had previously posted. Sure, but here's the really odd thing about all of that. You never actually lifted a finger to help her. You're earning $174,000 every single year. You drive a $64,000 car, yet you couldn't spare a mere few thousand to fix your own grandmother's roof. Do you know who ultimately ended up fixing it? It was conservative donors who actually raised the money and got the job done. Your own family and complete strangers had to step in and help her, because you simply wouldn't. St. Kennedy's voice held a genuine sense of bewilderment. Young lady, where I come from, family always comes first. You take care of your own. My mama raised me in Middletown, Louisiana. We didn't have much, but we made sure to take care of each other. If her roof was leaking, I'd be out there fixing it myself before I ever thought about buying a fancy car. He carefully gathered the invoices and photos into a neat stack. So, and here's the pattern I'm seeing. You preach about working families, but then you stiff working people. You demand that others sacrifice while you're living in luxury. You post about economic justice, yet you ignore your own grandmother's needs. You built this brand as someone from the working class, but the second you got to Congress, you started living just like the elites you claim to oppose. Kennedy leaned back in his chair. But maybe I'm being unfair. After all, Wood, you're quite famous for your economic policy proposals. Let's talk about your signature achievement, the Green New Deal. Kennedy pulled out a 14-page document and held it up as if it were a strange artifact. Back in February 2019, you introduced this resolution with Senator Ed Markey. The Green New Deal declared it essential to save our planet. It certainly got a lot of attention. It's still talked about today. So, let's discuss it. He opened to the first page. 14 pages. That's it. 14 pages to completely restructure the entire American economy. Now, when I was state treasurer, our annual budget document was well over 1,000 pages long. We had to account for every single dollar, every program, every contingency. But you thought you could remake America in just 14 pages. Kennedy pulled out an economic analysis. The American Action Forum, which is a nonpartisan think tank, by the way. They studied your plan to trying to figure out what it would actually cost. Want to know what they found? He wrote numbers on a board. $93 trillion over 10 years. Now, I'm just a country lawyer, but that looks like a whole lot of zeros to me. Kennedy did the arithmetic slowly, carefully showing his work like a patient teacher. There are roughly 130 million households in America. 93 trillion divided by 130 million equals, he wrote, you're $715,385 per household. So that comes out to about $715,000 per household over 10 years. That's roughly $71,500 per year. Every single year for 10 years. He looked at AOC. The median household income in America is about $70,000. So, you're actually asking average families to spend more than their entire annual income, not just discretionary income, but their total income, just on this one program, before they even buy food, before they pay rent, before they do anything else. Kennedy's voice carried a genuine concern. Young lady, please help me understand. If they spend all their money on the Green New Deal, how exactly are they supposed to eat? Before AOC could respond, Kennedy pulled out his phone and connected it to the audio system. But maybe I'm missing something. Maybe you explained the economics better when you were out promoting this. Let's watch what you said. He played a video of AOC in January 2019 on Instagram Live. The world is going to end in 12 years if we don't address climate change, and your biggest issue is how are we going to pay for it. This is our World War II. Kennedy paused the video and pulled out a calendar. You said that in January 2019, so 12 years from then would be, he counted on his fingers slowly, January 2031. That's 6 years from now. He looked at AOC with an exaggerated concern. Should I be making plans for Christmas 2030? Or is the world actually going to end before then? I'm asking seriously, ma'am, because if the world's ending, I really need to tell my grandchildren. Laughter rippled through the gallery. Kennedy's expression remained earnest. I mean, you said it on video. You used it to push your policy. Either you genuinely believed the world would literally end, or you were using fear to manipulate people. Which is it? AOC tried to explain it was rhetorical, meant to convey urgency. Kennedy nodded slowly. Rhetorical? I see. So, when you tell people the world will end, they're supposed to know you don't really mean it. Got it. He pulled out campaign finance reports. But here's my favorite part about your Green New Deal. One of its main goals is eliminating fossil fuel vehicles, right? Getting Americans out of their cars and onto public transit, thereby reducing carbon emissions from transportation. Kennedy displayed FEC filings on the screen. These are your campaign spending reports from 2018 and 2019. Your headquarters was in Queens, New York. Want to know how far it was from the subway? He paused for effect. A 1-minute walk, so 60 seconds. I timed it myself on Google Maps. Kennedy read from the reports. Campaign spending on Uber and Lyft rides, $29,365. Campaign spending on subway fares, $8,335. He did the math on his notepad. That's 3.5 times more money spent on cars than on public transit. All while you were telling Americans they needed to give up their cars and use public transportation. Your campaign headquarters was 1 minute from the subway, and yet you spent $30,000 on Uber rides. Kennedy looked up. And now you drive a $64,000 Tesla. Do you know where that electricity comes from? About 60% of it comes from fossil fuels, coal, natural gas. So you're still using fossil fuels, just with a few extra steps and a fancy car. He then gathered his papers. Young lady, he said, this is what we call do as I say, not as I do. You demand sacrifice from working families. Give up your cars. Pay $70,000 a year for the Green New Deal. Live with less. Yet, you're taking Ubers everywhere, driving a luxury electric car, and not sacrificing anything yourself. Kennedy leaned forward slightly. But maybe I'm being unfair again, he mused. After all, you do hold an economics degree from Boston University. That's a really good school. They certainly teach economics there. So surely you understand how economies actually work. Sure, let's talk about your economic expertise. Kennedy then pulled out a transcript, AOC's diploma from Boston University, showing degrees in economics and international relations. Now, Boston University, a good school, costs about $60,000 a year. And you graduated in 2011. That's a pretty significant investment in education. And since you got a degree in economics, you should definitely understand basic economic principles. He connected his phone to play some video clips. But then you say things like this. The first clip played AOC speaking at a town hall. Unemployment is low because everyone has two jobs. People are working 60, 70, 80 hours a week and can barely feed their kids. Kennedy stopped it right there. Ma'am, that's not how unemployment is calculated, he stated. Unemployment measures the percentage of people actively looking for work who simply can't find jobs. Whether someone works one job or three jobs, they're counted the exact same way. This is Economics 101. Literally, it's covered in the very first few weeks of an introductory course. He looked genuinely puzzled. Did they not teach you that at BU? Or did you maybe miss that class? The second clip featured AOC on a podcast. The Pentagon has lost $21 trillion. $21 trillion? Imagine what we could do with that money. Kennedy simply shook his head. The Pentagon didn't lose $21 trillion. That's the entire federal budget for 8 years. Just lost it. What actually happened was a series of accounting adjustments, entries that got repeated in different ledgers during audits. It's basic accounting. Anyone who's ever balanced a checkbook understands this. The third clip showed AOC being asked how to pay for her proposals. Just pay for it. We paid for World War II. We paid for the moon landing. I wants a toy. Just buy it, Paw. I wants a toy. Just buy it, Paw. I explained to her that we actually need money to buy things. She's 7. She's learning. You have an economics degree. And your answer is, just pay for it. He set aside the videos and then pulled out a different kind of document, congressional productivity reports. But maybe I'm being too harsh about your economic understanding, he offered. Let's look at what you've actually accomplished in Congress. After all, you've been there for 7 years now, since 2019. That's a pretty decent amount of time. Surely you've passed some significant legislation. Kennedy then displayed statistics from GovTrack. See a nonpartisan congressional tracking service. According to GovTrack's analysis, you've introduced the 5th fewest bills compared to your New York congressional delegation. 5th fewest. You're at the bottom. You've also joined bipartisan bills the 6th least often among House Democrats. He pulled up a list of her proposed legislation. You've introduced bills on housing, labor, environment, immigration. Good topics, important issues. But here's the thing. According to GovTrack, if most legislation gets no activity after it's introduced, that means they just go nowhere. No committee hearings, no votes, no passage, just press releases. Kennedy removed his glasses and rubbed his eyes. See, when I was Louisiana State Treasurer for 17 years, I had to manage actual budgets, make actual decisions. If I proposed something, I had to show how it would work, how we'd pay for it, what the consequences would be. I couldn't just say, trust me, or just pay for it. I had real responsibility. He looked at AOC with what might have been pity. You've been in Congress for 7 years. You're one of the most famous members. You're on television constantly. You have 14 million Instagram followers. But what have you actually accomplished legislatively? What major bills have you passed? Kennedy didn't wait for an answer. Well, I'll tell you what you've accomplished. You've made yourself famous. You're very good at social media. Let's talk about that. He pulled out statistics. 14 million Instagram followers, 8.9 million Twitter followers. You post multiple times per day, thousands of posts, hundreds of TikTok videos. You're everywhere online. Kennedy leaned forward. Young lady, help me understand something. You have time to make thousands of social media posts, but you don't have time to pass legislation. You have time to go to the Met Gala, but you don't have time to help your own grandmother. You have time for viral videos, but you don't have time to pay the makeup artist. He then gathered his papers. My generation, we honestly thought you earned respect by doing things, not just by having a bunch of followers. We figured you served people by getting actual results, not by posting Instagram stories. We totally believed that if you were going to represent people, you'd actually do something for them. Kennedy's voice then turned much more serious. But there's just one more thing we really need to talk about. Something way more serious than money troubles or social media posts. We need to discuss January 6th, 2021. Kennedy's whole vibe changed. He still had that folksy way about him, but his voice now had a serious weight you couldn't ignore. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, January 6th, was truly a dark day for our country. People lost their lives. Your officers got hurt trying to protect the Capitol. It was a really serious attack on our democratic system, which is why I have to ask you about what you said regarding that day. He then pulled up her Instagram video from February 2021. You shared a video where you talked about what you went through. It was super emotional, incredibly detailed. Let's take a look at some of it. The video showed AOC telling her story, describing her fear, hearing banging on her door, the yelling, and thinking she might not make it out alive. Kennedy paused the video. That's some really tough stuff to hear. If it's true, he said, pulling out a map of the Capitol complex. Now, let me show you something here. This right here is the United States Capitol building. He pointed right to that unmistakable dome. This is where the House chamber is located, and this is where the Senate meets up. This is where the break-in happened on January 6th. Then he pointed to a different building on the map. This is the Cannon House office building. That's where your office actually is. It's about 200 yards away from the Capitol. Completely different building, totally separate security area. Kennedy then pulled out an official report from the Capitol Police. So, according to these Capitol Police incident reports, which I got through official channels, not a single rioter ever got inside the Cannon office building. 0. To report. Representative Ocasio-Cortez report. Representative Ocasio-Cortez stayed in her Cannon office during the entire incident. Building security was kept up. No unauthorized people got in. Kennedy looked straight up. So, when you talked about hearing banging on your door and hearing people shout, "Where is she?" that was actually a Capitol police officer making sure you were safe. We're really in the Capitol that day. We're really in the Capitol that day. Like Representative Jason Crow, a former Army Ranger who served in Iraq and Afghanistan. He was right there in the House chamber when the breach happened. He actually used his own body to shield other members. He was in genuine danger. Or Representative Andy Kim, who spent hours after the attack helping janitors clean up shattered glass and debris. He was genuinely there, inside the Capitol, both during and after the attack. Kennedy's voice got a little bit harder. But you? You weren't. You were in a totally different building. You weren't in danger, yet you went on Instagram and talked about a trauma that you truly didn't go through. He then pulled out even more papers, fundraising emails sent just weeks after January 6th. and every single one of them highlighting AOC's terrifying story. And then you used that story to raise money. These emails reached millions of working Americans who genuinely thought you'd survived a violent attack. They sent in money because they believed you had gone through something truly awful. Kennedy read aloud from one particular email. "I seriously thought this was the end. I thought I wasn't going to make it." Your very own words used to raise cash. He then revealed the final amount. Over $3 million. You actually raised over $3 million by telling a story about being in danger, when you were, in fact, totally safe in a different building. For the very first time in the hearing, Kennedy stood up. His height and presence instantly took command of the entire room. "Young lady," he said, "he in the military. They have a term for pretending you had combat experience when you didn't. They call it stolen valor. It's honestly one of the most disgraceful things you could ever do. You're claiming trauma that rightfully belongs to other people. You're claiming a kind of courage you never even needed to show." His voice now had this undeniable moral power. The folks who were actually in the Capitol that day, the members huddling together, and the officers fighting attackers up close, the staff blocking doors, they went through real trauma. They showed real courage. And you just took their story and made it all about you. Kennedy then collected every single document he had presented. The unpaid bills, the campaign finance records, the legislative history, the Capitol Police reports. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, over this past hour, we've gone through a lot of information, but it all points to the exact same story. And I think it's high time we had a really honest talk about what that story truly shows us. Kennedy stayed standing, and something about his stance clearly signaled that the careful, step-by-step presentation was now finished. The jury had heard all the evidence. Now it was time for the verdict. "Young lady, I'm going to be completely upfront with you right now, even more direct than I've been, because I truly believe the American people deserve to understand exactly what we've uncovered here today." He'd start counting on his fingers, a signature move his audience knew meant a devastating summary was coming. Point 1. Your whole political brand was built on being a champion for working people. You were even a bartender once. You understood what it was like to struggle. At least, that's what you told the voters. But the second you got to Congress, and the moment money and fame came along, you completely ditched those values. You attended a $30,000 party while everyday working people were still struggling. You wore a tax-the-rich dress to party with billionaires. And most shockingly, you stiffed working people out of $6,000. That included makeup artists, hairstylists, and even hotel workers. You made them all wait for months. Some even had to threaten legal action just to get their money. Point 2. You hold an economics degree from Boston University. A great education, I'm sure, but you seem to miss basic economic principles. You don't even know how unemployment is calculated. That's usually covered in the first week. You proposed a $93 trillion plan without any real funding mechanism, just saying, "We'll pay for it." You claimed the Pentagon lost $21 trillion, when in reality, those were just accounting adjustments. For someone with an economics degree, you appear remarkably confused about how economics actually functions. Point 3. Your reputation was built on the Green New Deal. You said the world would end in 12 years, demanding Americans give up cars, accept lower living standards, and make huge sacrifices. Yet, you made absolutely no sacrifices yourself. You spent 3 times more campaign money on Uber rides than on subway fares, even though your headquarters was just a minute from the subway. You drive a $64,000 Tesla, which is powered by fossil fuel electricity. You live in a luxury apartment, all while telling working families they need to sacrifice. Point 4. You've been in Congress for 7 years now. According to nonpartisan tracking, you've introduced the fewest bills in your delegation, rarely joined bipartisan efforts, and most of your proposals just went nowhere. But you've managed to make thousands of social media posts. You're famous, but you're not very effective. And you're great at getting attention, but not so great at governing. Point 5. You claimed trauma you never actually experienced. You said you thought you were going to die on January 6th, but you weren't even in the Capitol building. You were safe in a different building, with security protecting you. And yet, you used that lie to raise $3 million. You exploited a real tragedy, dishonored those who actually faced danger, and used it all to enrich your campaign. Kennedy's voice rose just a bit, is still controlled, but now carrying an unmistakable conviction. Now, let me tell you about my generation, young lady. When I was your age, 35 years old, I was clerking for the Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals, learning how the law actually worked, learning that you couldn't just say things, you had to back them up. You actually had to do the work. I spent 17 years as Louisiana State Treasurer, managing billions of dollars, balancing budgets, making payroll, and maintaining infrastructure. Every single dollar had to be accounted for. Every decision came with consequences. I couldn't just say, "We'll pay for it later," or "Trust me," or "Post a viral video." I had real, tangible responsibility. Kennedy's drawl became more pronounced, his Louisiana roots truly shining through. My generation believed you earned respect through accomplishment, not by how many followers you had. You served people through actual legislation, and not Instagram stories. You sacrificed for what you believed in. You didn't demand others sacrifice while you yourself lived in luxury. And you certainly didn't lie about being in danger just to raise money. He walked to the edge of the platform, gazing down at AOC. Young lady, you're obviously very talented, incredibly skilled at social media, and fantastic at getting attention. You know how to craft a message, work a camera, and make yourself famous. Those are absolutely real skills in today's modern world. Kennedy paused for a moment. But governing? That requires much more than just that. It requires genuine knowledge, real knowledge, not just catchy slogans. It requires discipline, like paying your bills, doing your homework, and truly following through. It requires sacrifice, actually giving up something yourself instead of merely demanding others do it. And it requires integrity, telling the truth even when it's inconvenient, and serving people even when no camera is watching. His voice dropped to barely above a whisper. But in that silent room, every single word carried immense weight. And from everything we've discussed today, every document, every video, every record, I simply haven't seen any evidence of those qualities. What I have seen is someone who's brilliant at performance, but truly terrible at governance. Someone who preaches sacrifice, yet lives in luxury. Someone who claims to fight for working people, all while stiffing workers. Someone who has an economics degree, but somehow doesn't understand economics. Someone who's been in Congress for 7 years, but hasn't accomplished much beyond just making herself famous. Kennedy straightened up, his final assessment delivered with the unwavering authority of 5 decades in public service. Young lady, You represent everything that is fundamentally wrong with modern politics. It's all about style, not substance, performance, not results, fame, not accomplishment, and social media metrics, not real achievement. You've gathered followers by telling them exactly what they want to hear, but you've never actually put in the effort to truly help them. He collected his papers one last time. I don't have any more questions. Kennedy then sat back, effectively dismissing her with that simple move, as if she wasn't worth any more of his time. That silent message hit her hard. She'd been judged, found lacking, and was no longer deserving of his attention. AOC attempted to speak, her voice trembling. Senator Kennedy, you've picked and chosen facts to make up a false story. Cherry-picked? Kennedy genuinely looked surprised as he glanced up. Ma'am, I'm simply reading from your own financial disclosures, your campaign reports, your videos, and your Instagram posts. These are your words, your actions, and your records. All I'm asking is for you to explain them. She tried once more. My record truly speaks for itself. Yes, ma'am, it does. It certainly does. Kennedy gently cut in. That's precisely what I mean. Your record tells a very clear story. And what it shows is that you care more about being famous than actually getting things done. More interested in making viral videos than passing real laws. And more interested in a luxurious lifestyle than truly living by your stated values. The committee chairman stepped in, feeling that the harsh questioning had run its course. Senator Kennedy, I believe you've made your arguments clear. Ms. Ocasio-Cortez, you are now excused. See, this committee will review the evidence presented today and consider potential ethics referrals. As AOC walked away from the witness table, the confident way she had entered was completely gone. The squad members sitting in the gallery were unusually silent. Even progressive media seemed uncomfortable. Even news outlets that supported her were frantically typing, unable to overlook the documented evidence Kennedy had just laid out. Within just 2 hours, AOC Exposed was already trending on Twitter. Cable news channels played Kennedy's most impactful moments over and over. That's not how unemployment is actually figured out. Just pay for it isn't a real economic policy. You weren't even in the Capitol building. You shortchanged working people. Even liberal commentators found it tough to defend her. Look, a Kennedy showed documented proof. Those are her actual financial records. That's her FEC filing. That's the Capitol Police report. These aren't just opinions. They're facts. The squad members mostly stayed quiet. They offered general statements about focusing on their work, but without any strong defense for AOC. Progressive leaders quietly complained among themselves that she had become a problem. In her own district, community organizers discreetly reached out to people who might challenge her in the primary. She cares more about being famous than actually representing us. Our neighborhood needs real help, not just Instagram posts. Conservative media had a fantastic time with it. Country lawyer destroys AOC with simple questions. But even more damaging were the headlines from moderate news outlets. Ocasio-Cortez struggles to explain lifestyle versus rhetoric. Documents show pattern of unpaid bills to workers. Capitol Police contradict AOC's January 6th account. That evening, AOC was in her Navy Yard apartment, scrolling through her phone and seeing all the damage. Her team was in full crisis mode. We have to change this story. Can we get other squad members to defend you? Maybe a viral video in response. But the issue was straightforward. Kennedy had simply used her own words, her own records, and her own actions against her. There was nothing they could really spin. The facts were just the facts. Back in Washington, D.C., AOC walked back and forth in her luxury apartment while her team desperately tried to manage the fallout. The infinity pool, visible right outside her window, seemed to mock her working-class image. Her phone kept buzzing, non-stop. It was reporters, staffers, and worried squad members calling. "We can really highlight your legislative agenda," one aide suggested. Another aide pointed out that Kennedy had already proven she'd introduced the fewest bills. Someone else countered, "So, what about the Green New Deal?" He showed she spent more on Ubers than on the subway. And that world-ending clip is absolutely everywhere. AOC tossed her phone onto the couch. "So, what do we actually do?" Her chief of staff spoke very carefully. "Honestly, we just need to wait it out. Keep posting. Stay visible. And hope it all just blows over." But everyone there knew the truth. In just 43 minutes, Kennedy had completely dismantled 7 years of a carefully built image. The former bartender turned congresswoman had been exposed as nothing more than another political showman. All style, zero substance. She looked at her laptop, seeing the poll numbers already changing in her district, and the comments on her Instagram posts suddenly becoming more critical than supportive. She faced the harsh reality that even 14 million followers couldn't shield her from documented facts. Meanwhile, in Madisonville, Louisiana, Senator John Kennedy sat on his back porch. His home, probably worth around $300,000, a mere fraction of AOC's apartment value, looked out onto a quiet bayou. He slowly sipped sweet tea, watching the sun dip below the water. His wife came out with a plate of dinner. "You were pretty hard on her today." Kennedy nodded slowly. "I was," he replied, "but someone had to be. These people come to Washington, get a little famous, and then forget why they were even sent here. Do you think she'll ever learn? Maybe. Maybe not. But maybe, just maybe, some other young person out there watching will take a lesson from all this. They'll finally grasp that true service goes far beyond what you post on social media. And that representing people means getting things done for them, not simply putting up a post." A local news team from WDSU New Orleans pulled up, ready for an interview. Kennedy gestured them towards the chairs waiting on his porch. His wife, ever gracious, brought out some sweet tea for everyone. "Senator Kennedy," the reporter began, "your questions today absolutely blew up online. Millions of people have watched it. So, how do you feel about all that?" Kennedy paused, thinking for a moment, then replied, "Honestly, going viral wasn't my intention. I was just trying to ask some pretty straightforward questions. The kind of questions any regular working person would want answers to. Like, how exactly do you earn a living? And why haven't you paid your bills? Or, what have you actually managed to achieve? Those aren't meant to trick anyone. They're just fundamental questions about accountability. Some folks are saying you were too hard on her, especially about her age and experience. I never once brought up her gender, her race, or anything personal about her background. What I talked about was her track record, her voting history, her spending, and her public statements. That's completely fair game in this line of work. And regarding experience, well, if you're planning to completely overhaul the American economy, you really ought to know how economies operate. If your goal is to represent everyday working people, then you owe it to them to treat working people properly. Age really isn't the point here. What truly matters are the results you deliver. So, what's the main message you hope people take away from today?" Kennedy turned his gaze directly towards the camera lens. I want folks to remember that having a lot of social media followers doesn't automatically mean you've accomplished anything substantial. Being famous isn't the same as being effective. And just posting online about working families doesn't automatically translate into real help for them. My generation learned that serving people comes from putting in hard work, achieving real results, and actually doing things, not just talking or posting about doing them. He took a slow sip of his tea. That young lady is certainly very talented. She's quite skilled when it comes to media, and she knows how to connect with people on the internet. However, if she truly wants to serve those people, not just entertain or inspire them, but genuinely pass laws that make a difference, she'll have to put in the effort, read the legislation, build alliances, to make concessions, and get those laws passed. That's what governing actually looks like. And believe me, it's a lot tougher than simply posting a video. The interview soon concluded. While the crew gathered their gear, Kennedy lent a hand with their equipment, asked them about their loved ones, and wished them a safe journey home. Once they had departed, Kennedy made his way back to his familiar porch. A neighbor happened to stroll by, walking their dog. They waved to him. "Hey, Senator," the neighbor called out. "Saw you on the news just now. You really gave that girl a piece of your mind, didn't you?" Kennedy waved back with a smile. "Just asking questions, Bobby," he replied casually. "That's all it ever was." He then sat beside his wife as the evening twilight settled over the bayou. Meanwhile, in Washington, D.C. AOC was likely scrambling to try and salvage her public image. But here in Louisiana, a 73-year-old man who had never chased social media fame, who sat contentedly, knowing he had simply spoken the truth. His wife gently broke the comfortable quiet. "You know what I really appreciate about you?" she mused. "What's that?" he asked softly. "You've been in politics for 40 years, and you still live right here in the same house, still enjoy this very porch, and you even answer your own front door. You simply never forgot your roots." Kennedy offered a gentle smile. "Well, that's truly the heart of the matter, isn't it?" he began. "All those high and mighty folks in Washington, they tend to forget. They gain a bit of power, some money, a touch of fame, and then they lose sight of why they're there, who they're meant to serve, what it feels like to struggle with bills, to worry about their children, or to wonder if they'll ever have enough." He then gestured towards his unpretentious home, the old truck sitting in his driveway, and the peaceful neighborhood surrounding them. "This place, it keeps me grounded and honest. It constantly reminds me exactly who I'm working for. Certainly not for the types who attend those extravagant $30,000 parties, but for the hard-working people who can barely afford a $300 bill without really feeling the pinch." They settled back into a comfortable quiet, watching tiny fireflies flicker and dance above the water. Far off in the distance, a church bell chimed, marking 7 o'clock. "You know," Kennedy mused, his voice thoughtful, that young lady now faces a significant choice. She can choose to double down on the theatrics and performance, which means more viral videos, more public outrage, and ultimately, just more noise. Or she could actually learn something valuable, genuinely put in the effort, and truly serve people instead of just putting up posts claiming to serve them. Which path do you think she'll end up taking? Kennedy let out a soft chuckle. Well, if I were a betting man, which I'm certainly not, I'd wager she'll stick with what's brought her this far in her career. Fame, after all, is incredibly addictive. Those followers, all that attention, and the feeling of being important are genuinely hard to relinquish. He slowly stood up, stretched his limbs, and cast one last look out at his cherished hometown. But then again, maybe I'm completely mistaken. Perhaps she'll manage to surprise me after all. Maybe, just maybe, she'll decide that being genuinely effective is more important than being famous, that truly serving people matters more than just entertaining them, and that tangible results outweigh any number of retweets. He then opened the door for his wife. And if she actually learns that crucial lesson, well, that could turn out to be the very best outcome from today's entire hearing. Not only exposing what's incorrect, but perhaps even helping someone discover the right path forward. They stepped inside their home for a simple, quiet dinner. There were no cameras, no followers, and no viral moments, just an honest life, genuinely lived in service to people who clearly valued actual results far more than mere rhetoric. It seemed the former bartender had just learned firsthand that Instagram likes offer absolutely no preparation for a thorough Louisiana cross-examination. The seasoned Oxford man had, in his own way, taught a powerful lesson about the enduring importance of substance over fleeting style. And somewhere, 14 million followers were realizing that fame, without actual accomplishment, is just